Tuesday, we told you about an ethics complaint filed by Police Juror Jay Scott, alleging that fellow police juror Ernest Nelson violated a statute in the Louisiana Code of Governmental Ethics.
Well, Nelson has responded to those allegations and tells a much different story. Check it out.
In Scott's October 8th letter to the board, he explains that Nelson was appointed to the jury after the death of juror Theodore Fontaine in November of last year. Scott claims that Nelson, who's now running for the jury seat, is violating Louisiana Revised Statute 42, which says no person appointed to a seat can qualify to run for that seat in the next election cycle. Scott is calling for accountability and fair application of the laws. In a letter to KALB, Nelson explains that any ethics complaint filed by Jay Scott is an act of local politics. Nelson provided minutes from the meeting when he was appointed that shows Jay Scott nominated local pastor Randy Harris to fill the vacancy. That nomination failed for lack of a second. This, Nelson claims, is the basis for the ethics complaint. Ironically, Nelson attends Pastor Randy Harris's church. Nelson's letter also brought up past accusations that led to the filing of an injunction on Scott earlier this year by Police Jury President Joe Bishop. That injunction alleges Scott on multiple occasions made threats, harassed, and used vulgar, obscene language to other members of the jury. In his statement, Nelson calls this the real violation of ethics. But Nelson says what's done is done, and the voters will decide on November 5th.
Well, we have reached out to the Louisiana Board of Ethics and are waiting for them to respond. However, after speaking with Police Jury President Joe Bishop yesterday, he says all actions regarding Nelson's current campaign are legal.
I also reached out to Jay Scott to see if he would like to respond. We'll have more on this as it develops.